The Super Bowl is over, and that means it's officially baseball season. The offseason is over, spring training has begun, and it's time to grade every single MLB team's offseason for the 2025 through 2026 MLB offseason. I do just want to say there are a few more players that are available, Zach Gallen being the biggest of them in my opinion, but like I said, it's spring training time. The offseason's over. If you add Zach Gallen, you added him in spring training. Trades can still be made, other things can still be signed, doesn't matter. This is the ranking. If a team does sign Zach Gallen, I might update it in the comments section, or maybe I won't, who knows. Anyway, since it's the beginning of the baseball season, there's no better time to subscribe to my channel. Less than 10% of my viewers are subscribed, and if you want more baseball content throughout the entire regular season, this is the place to be. Let's get into the video. We're going alphabetical order today. We're starting out with a team that I don't really like their offseason very much at all, and that is the Arizona Diamondbacks. They haven't brought in a ton of talent. Nolan Arenado, Merrill Kelly, Michael Soroka, and Carlos Santana are the biggest of their additions. But none of those players are really needle movers in my opinion, and they lost Zach Gallen, Jake McCarthy, which that doesn't matter too much, as well as Blaze Alexander. I don't know, this isn't a great offseason. It's not necessarily the worst offseason I've ever seen, and if they are able to bring back Zach Gallen, it would make it okay, I guess. But I don't know, I'm gonna start it out with a C- as a bit of a baseline. This is a slightly below league average offseason in my opinion. Let's put this as a base. I didn't think we'd be getting worse than a C- already, but I have to give the Athletics a worse grade than the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Athletics had a very bad offseason. I mean, all they brought in was Jeff McNeil, Mark Leiter Jr., and Scott Barlow. None of those players are very good. Mark Leiter's fine. Jeff McNeil has been bad for a couple of years now, and Scott Barlow, who cares? They lost Jose Leclerc, who was terrible, but Sean Newcomb was really good for them, and JJ Bleday as well. I'm giving them a D. They didn't really do anything. They needed a starting pitcher really badly, and they just didn't go out and get one. D for the Athletics. I'm disappointed in what they did. Extremely disappointed, actually. Next up is the Atlanta Braves, and they had a fairly successful offseason in my opinion. They didn't lose too many guys. They lost Pierce Johnson and Marcell Ozuna. That's really the only names that they lost that are real impact players. However, they re-signed Raisel Iglesias, which is a great start to the offseason. They brought in a few flyers like Martin Perez, Jorge Mateo, Ian Hamilton. Guys like that are pretty decent players. They traded for Mauricio Dubon to replace Nick Allen for defense. Ha-Sung Kim was a good signing. Unfortunately, he got injured, so that really sucks for them, but I can't really blame them for that. They brought in Mike Yastrzemski, pretty good player, and their big acquisition, Robert Suarez, their new closer. Having Raisel Iglesias and Robert Suarez as your 8 and 9 is an incredible duo for the bullpen, and I don't think that this team had to do a lot in free agency. I think that they are one of the best teams in baseball, but they did need another back-end reliever, and they got the best one on the market, so I'm going to give them a B. I think they could have done a little bit more offensively, especially at shortstop, but they did really good in the bullpen, so B for them. I think that makes the most sense. We're now heading over to a team that I think had a really good offseason, and that is the Baltimore Orioles. The Baltimore Orioles didn't lose a ton. They lost Grayson Rodriguez and Cage Stroud, who are okay players. Grayson Rodriguez is pretty good in my opinion, but the guys that they brought in are more than good enough to replace them. Pete Alonso being the big one, obviously. That's one of their biggest deals that they've ever given out, and you know what? 5 years for Pete Alonso? I wish the Red Sox had done it as a Red Sox fan. I think that's a great signing. Ryan Helsley is a potential buy low, sell high option, or just having a very good reliever if he bounces back to form. Shane Baz has some of the best stuff in baseball. Taylor Ward hit almost 40 home runs last year. He's another addition. And Zach Eflin was re-signed as well. They also added a few depth pieces like Blaze Alexander, Leody Taveras, and they brought in Andrew Kittredge to shore up the bullpen. This is a really good offseason. I wish that they had gone out and got a frontline starter. that would have given them an A+ offseason. But because they missed out on that, I'm going to drop them 2 letter grades and go to an A-. I think that's fair. If they get Zach Gallen, I'd give them an A+. If they had gotten Framber Valdez, A+. They haven't done those things, A-. But still, really good offseason for Baltimore. Next up is my favorite team, the Boston Red Sox, and I think I'm going to get yelled at by both national fans, well, not like the Washington Nationals, but just all fan bases, as well as my own fan base, because I'm going to give them a B+. I think they had a really solid offseason. Obviously, they lost some key players, Alex Bregman being the #1, and Lucas Giolito was a pretty big loss as well. Justin Wilson and Nathaniel Lowe were also okay for the team, and if you look at their subtractions, they traded away a lot of their starting pitching depth in the minor leagues. But you know what? This is why I think that this offseason was really good for the Red Sox. They added Ranger Suarez, Wilson Contreras, Sonny Gray, Johan Oviedo, Caleb Durbin. That's 5 pretty decent impact players. 4 of those came via the trade, and they didn't give up Peyton Tolley. They didn't give up Connolly early, and they didn't give up Marcelo Meyer. They didn't panic trade their good players. They traded away depth that they didn't need and added guys that will help the team in 2026. This is a much improved team. It's one of the best rotations in baseball now. The defense is some of the best in baseball, and they have a really good bullpen. I would bump this up to an A- if they went out and signed a left-handed reliever, but because they haven't done that yet, I think a B+ is the fairest spot for them. Again, I think you're pretty close-minded if you don't think this is a good offseason. The next team on the list is the Chicago Cubs, Alex Bregman's new team, and I'm going to give them an A-. I think the Alex Bregman contract was an overpay, but you know what? You got Alex Bregman, so I'm going to give you credit for that. They also brought in Edward Cabrera, re-signed Shota Imanaga, brought in Hunter Harvey, Phil Maton, Caleb Thielbar, Holby Milner. That's a lot of guys, but they did lose Kyle Tucker, Andrew Kittredge, Brad Keller, Drew Pomerantz, Taylor Rogers, Ryan Brazier. They did lose a lot of bullpen pieces, and of course Kyle Tucker, who was debatably the best player on the market this year. An A- might be a little aggressive. They maybe deserve lower, but I'm going to keep them at an A-. I think they had a good offseason. Staying in Chicago, next up we have the White Sox. And this is also going to make some people mad, potentially. I'm giving the White Sox an A- as well. I think they had a very good offseason. They traded away Luis Robert, which makes a ton of sense. They really had to do that eventually. They didn't really lose anything else because they didn't really have any other talent on the roster. And they brought in some really decent players that they could either trade or hopefully can help them build for the future. Munetaka Murakami being the biggest, of course. That is a phenomenal signing, one of my favorite signings of the entire offseason. Sir Anthony Dominguez is a decent reliever. Anthony Kay coming from overseas might be good, maybe a trade option. Jordan Hicks in a trade with the Red Sox. Hicks was terrible with the Red Sox, but you know what? The White Sox aren't competing, so it's a good guy to take a flyer on, in my opinion. Austin Hayes on a 1-year deal, you could trade him potentially. Luis Angel Acuna came over in the Luis Robert trade. I love that return for them. Sean Newcomb was really good last year. Jared Kelenic was obviously a former top prospect. This is a really good offseason. They did exactly what they had to do. I think they did great. I almost want to give them an A, but I'm going to stay with an A- because I don't want to be too aggressive. The Reds had a weird offseason, and I don't know exactly how to grade it, but I'm going to give it a grade anyway because that's the point of this video. They lost Zach Littell, Gavin Lux, Austin Hayes, Miguel Andujar, and Nick Martinez as their biggest pieces, but they brought in Eugenio Suarez, JJ Bleday, Emilio Pagan, Pierce Johnson, Caleb Ferguson. I think they got slightly worse, maybe they got slightly better. I don't know. I'm just going to give them a C. I think it's as average as it gets. I think the pieces coming in are the same as the pieces going out. C for the Reds. C. I only have one F on this list, and here it comes. The next team is an F, and that is the Cleveland Guardians. What an awful offseason. They added Colin Holderman and Sean Armstrong, and that's it. I don't care that they didn't lose a lot. They didn't add anything. And you know what? When you add nothing, you're pathetic. I think the Guardians had the worst offseason in baseball. They didn't add a single thing. Terrible offseason, Cleveland. Terrible. I feel a little bit unfair grading the Colorado Rockies offseason because they can't really attract any talent right now. So I feel like what they did was decent, not good, but like it's an effort, I guess. Not really. I'm giving them a little bit too much credit here. But at least they brought in Willie Castro, Michael Lorenzen, traded for Jake McCarthy, and Edward Julian. Like, those are decent players, but I don't know. None of them are needle movers, of course. So I'm just gonna give the Rockies a D plus. It's not the worst offseason ever, but it's not good. You want me to say that it's good? It's not. So D plus. The Detroit Tigers are up next, and they saved themselves from a second F in this video with the Framber Valdez signing. I don't necessarily think that the pieces that they've brought in are bad. They re-signed Gleyber Torres on the qualifying offer, re-signed Kyle Finnegan, and brought in Kenley Jansen. All of those players are one-year deals, so I don't really care about them too much, but like I said, they brought in Framber Valdez on a 3-year deal. He was a top 10 free agent going into the offseason, so getting him is big for the Tigers. However, the way that they've handled the Tarek Skubal thing, that's enough for me to knock down this offseason a few points. It really is. They got absolutely rocked by him in arbitration, and they haven't even tried to extend him. They didn't trade him, so now his value is going to be nothing when they lose him in free agency. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. The Framber Valdez helps them out, but has an opt-out after year 2. So they're going to lose Tarek next year, and then the year after that, they're going to lose Framber. So I don't know. It's like a band-aid. I'm giving them a C plus because I can't really go lower because they got Valdez, but that's all they're getting. C plus for the Tigers. I haven't heard a ton of people saying that the Astros have had a terrible offseason, but the Astros really have not had a good offseason in my opinion. They didn't lose the most ever. They lost Framber Valdez, obviously, like I just said, he went to the Tigers. They lost Mauricio Dubon to the Braves, and they traded away Jacob Melton, who was one of their top prospects, as well as losing Victor Caratini to the Twins. The issue is they weren't very good last year, and they didn't add anything, and they got worse. Tatsuya Amai is a decent signing, but he's not good enough to replace Framber Valdez, so you got worse. And Mike Burrows, I don't think he's a bad player, but what does that do for you? Not very much. They haven't traded away Isaac Paredes, which they've wanted to do all offseason. Getting back Yordan Alvarez is going to help them out a lot, obviously, but I don't think that they had a good offseason. I'm giving them a D+. Maybe you guys disagree with me on that, but they haven't done anything. They really didn't do anything. I think the next team, the Kansas City Royals, had a solid offseason. I think they were pretty good. They brought in Matt Strahm as a reliever, of course, Lane Thomas, Isaac Collins, Nick Mears, Alex Lang, who was really good a couple of years ago. That's not bad. And they lost guys like Mike Yastrzemski, Michael Lorenzen, Angel Zerpa, but those aren't really impact players. I think bringing in Isaac Collins and Nick Mears, as well as Matt Strahm, more than outweigh what you lost. So I think they had a good offseason. I'll give them a B minus, slightly above average. Not great, but definitely not bad at all. B minus. I think that's fair for the Royals. The team up next is also getting a B minus in my opinion, and that's the Los Angeles Angels. They have lost some pieces. Actually, they lost quite a few pieces. Tyler Anderson, Andrew Chafin, Luis Rengifo, Taylor Ward, Kenley Jansen, Brock Burke. Those are all decent players, but I really like some of the guys that they brought in. Grayson Rodriguez was traded for Taylor Ward, and getting controllable starting pitching is extremely valuable, and I don't think that we have seen anywhere close to the peak of Grayson Rodriguez yet in MLB, so I really like that trade. Josh Lowe is also a really solid player when he's healthy, so I like that trade as well from Tampa Bay. Kirby Yates and Jordan Romano could be really good. They have been all-stars in the past, so I like giving them a shot. Alek Manoah as well, same thing there, just as a starting pitcher. Drew Pomerantz was really good last year. Brent Suter, he's normally pretty good, and they brought back Yohan Moncada. I think that's a B minus offseason. It could even be B, but I'm going to keep it at B minus. I think they did a good job. They lost quite a bit, but they also did a good job at recuperating their talent. I like it. The next team, obviously we're staying in Los Angeles if we're going alphabetical order. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers, and they're getting the first A of the video. The Dodgers had a phenomenal offseason, getting the best player on the market in Edwin Diaz. What? I said Edwin Diaz was the best player. Getting the best player on the market, Kyle Tucker, and getting the best closer on the market, Edwin Diaz. They also re-signed World Series hero Miguel Rojas. They really didn't lose any players that made an impact last year other than Enrique Hernandez, but he might come back still. He hasn't been signed. I would give them an A+ if they went out and got one more reliever. I still think they could use a little bit of help in the bullpen, but that's really being nitpicky. They're getting an A because they could have done slightly more, but they really didn't need to. So A. I'm shocked that this is the case, but the Miami Marlins are the first team on this list that's really sold, and I kind of like when teams admit that it's time to sell. I can't give them an A offseason for selling, but I'm gonna give them credit for trading away some pieces. I wish that they would have traded away maybe a little bit more if they were really going to commit to a trade. They traded away Edward Cabrera and Ryan Weathers. I would have loved for them to have traded Sandy Alcantara too, but they didn't do that. They got Owen Casey from the Edward Cabrera trade, which is a really good return in my opinion. They also signed Pete Fairbanks and Christopher Morel, both from the Rays, which is kind of funny, but those are two players that are pretty good and they could trade at the deadline if they have to, and they got a little bit of depth in Esteury Ruiz and Chris Paddock. I'm just gonna give them a C+ offseason. I think it's it's just an average offseason. It's a C+. This next team sold too, and I have no idea why, because that's the Milwaukee Brewers. I'm giving them a D+. I'm mad at them. They won almost 100 games last year, and they traded away some of their good players. Freddie Peralta's gone, their best pitcher. Caleb Durbin was traded to the Red Sox today as of recording, which just makes no sense. I have no idea why they traded a guy like that with 5 years of control. But they didn't just do it once, they also did it with Isaac Collins, who was another, Rookie of the Year candidate. They traded away 2 Rookie of the Year candidates last year in this offseason for left-handed pitchers, and one of them was a reliever. I don't know what they were doing. Tobias Myers was also a pretty good pitcher, and so was Nick Mears. They lost him. They lost all those guys, and I don't know why. It makes no sense to me. Shelby Miller, Rhys Hoskins are also free agents. They did re-sign Brandon Woodruff on a qualifying offer. They did get Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat for Freddie Peralta and Tobias Myers, which is a pretty decent return. And then they got Kyle Harrison and David Hamilton for Caleb Durbin. I don't know. You should have added, not sold. You guys won 100 games last year. They make me so angry, so I'm giving them a D+. Speaking of teams that make me angry, if you've watched my videos in the past, you know I'm not a fan of how the Twins operate. I would give them an F, but you know what? They did one thing that I really like this offseason. They fired their GM. Their GM, he just hasn't traded away any of their players, and I don't understand why. The Twins are obviously not competing. Why wouldn't you trade your stars like Joe Ryan before they leave in free agency for nothing? I don't get it. Anyway, the Twins have done nothing productive this offseason. They brought in Victor Caratini, Josh Bell, Taylor Rogers, Eric Wagaman, Orlando Arcia, Gio Urshela. Yep, that's going to move the needle. You're back to competing in the AL Central, the worst division in baseball, by the way. You're back to competing in it. Just kidding, you're not even doing that. How did you not trade Pablo Lopez or Joe Ryan? You guys drive me crazy. D-. Terrible offseason once again. In my offseason losers video, I had the New York Mets. And you know what? They did a damn good job since I made that video. They've really bounced back and they had one of the best off seasons in baseball. They are no longer a loser. They are now a massive winner. I would give them an A+ if 2 things were true. If Bo Bichette was not basically signed to a 1-year deal and Freddie Peralta was not traded on a 1-year deal. If Bo Bichette had 5, 6, maybe even more years on his contract, that would be a better signing and I'd bump it up by half a letter grade. And if Freddie Peralta had an extension and was not on a 1-year deal, I would bump that up by half a letter grade, and that would give them an A+. because I'm giving them an A- right now. But they added Bo Bichette, Freddie Peralta, Luis Robert, Marcus Semien, Devin Williams, Jorge Polanco, Luke Weaver, Tobias Myers, and then even like MJ Melendez on a flyer. That's really, really a lot of talent coming in. They did lose a lot of talent too, though, in Pete Alonso, who obviously is a massive loss. Same with Edwin Diaz, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, that's not really a big loss. Tyler Rogers, who's a really good reliever, Jet Williams, Brandon Sproat, Luis Angel Acuna, Ryan Helsley, Gregory Soto, Ryan Stanek. Not all of those players are necessarily the best players in the world, but they did lose a lot of MLB talent and players, so I can't give them an A+ because they only brought in guys on 1-year deals basically with Bo Bichette and Freddie Peralta, but I am giving them an A-. They did a lot better and they're in a good position heading into 2026 because they set themselves up very well this offseason. Good job, Mets. You rebounded when I didn't think that you were going to after losing Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz. The other New York team, not very good. Not a very good offseason for the New York Yankees. I could go a little bit more aggressive, but sometimes I feel like my bias gets in the way of what is actually happening with the Yankees because I don't like them. I'm a Red Sox fan. I don't like the Yankees. I'm going to give them a C-, but I really think that I could go into the Ds if I really wanted to. They're losing Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, Mark Leiter Jr., and Ian Hamilton. They brought in only Ryan Weathers. They did re-sign Cody Bellinger, Trent Grisham, Ryan Yarbrough, Paul Goldschmidt, Ahmed Rosario, whatever. The big one there, of course, is Cody Bellinger. If they had lost Cody Bellinger in free agency, they would literally be getting an F from me right now. So Brian Cashman should be thanking Cody Bellinger. But for the Yankees to say that they're not running it back with the same team and then literally running it back with the exact same team, it's pretty silly. You know what? I'm giving them a D+. They did not have a good offseason. They really didn't. They got worse. If you want to say Garrett Cole's coming back, so they got better, yeah, Garrett Cole would be coming back regardless, though. Like, that's not an excuse for why they didn't add anything. They still should have added a couple of things. They would have been way better if they signed players, obviously. So I'm not giving them Garrett Cole's coming back. Garrett Cole doesn't play third base. The next team here, I kind of wish that it wasn't going back to back with the New York Yankees because I feel like a little bit of a hypocrite here giving the Phillies a B because they kind of did the same thing that the Yankees did and just re-signed their guys, but they did add a little bit more talent in my opinion because they added Brad Keller and Adolis Garcia. Now the issue with calling this a B offseason is they also lost more talent than what the Yankees did because they lost Ranger Suarez, Harrison Bader, and Matt Strahm. You know what? I'm giving the Phillies a C+. I take it back. I don't think that they had that great of an offseason. I was getting blinded by the fact that they brought in Brad Keller, who I think is a really good reliever, and that's going to really help their bullpen. But apart from that, they have to get lucky with Adolis Garcia bouncing back, and all they did was bring back Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto. And of course, losing Ranger Suarez is very detrimental to them. So yeah, I'm actually changing this to a C+. Not very good for them now that I'm really looking at it. It's not terrible, but they should have done better. Oh, and actually, obviously they knew that they had to do better because they desperately wanted Bo Bichette and then missed him and then didn't try to replace that bat. When a team misses out on a player that they want and then they don't go and fill that need with a different player, that worries me because that means that they know that they had a hole and they didn't address it. So I'm giving the Phillies a C+, not a B. I don't think they deserve a B. I'm proud of the Pirates. I'm proud of them. They had a good offseason. I'm giving them a B+. They brought in Brandon Lau, Ryan O'Hearn, Marcell Ozuna, Gregory Soto, Jake Mangum, and a few other pieces. That's good. You brought in 3 real bats. Brandon Lau, Ryan O'Hearn, and Marcell Ozuna. That's 3 real MLB players to go along with Paul Skeens, and you're trying. They might win 85 games this year. They have a pretty solid team. I'm giving them a B+. Good job, Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm proud of you. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not saying anything negative, just good job. You did good. I feel bad giving the Padres a D, but I have to because their offseason was really bad. They did not do anything really at all except sign Michael King on a very team-friendly contract. I know that they don't have an ownership group still, or they're trying to sell the team or something like that. I know that they're going through hell right now with that organization. I understand. That's why I feel bad. But still, they lost Dylan Cease, Luis Ariz, Robert Suarez, and Ryan O'Hearn, and all they really brought in was Miguel Andujar. It's just not a good offseason. It's a D. Even the Rockies brought in more talent than you did, in my opinion. Of course, you did retain Michael King, but I don't give a ton of credit for retaining a player that was already on the team, especially when you're losing 4 other impact players from the same team. You had to do more. You didn't do more. You're getting a D. I feel like I want to go lower than I did on the San Francisco Giants, but I don't think I'm going to. I have them as a C+, but I really don't like what they've done. You know, I'm going to give them a C, not a C+. I think objectively their offseason isn't awful, but I just don't like it, so I'm going to give them an average grade. They didn't really lose anything in free agency unless you want to consider Justin Verlander a big loss, but he wasn't good for them, so I'm not going to do that. Harrison Bader, Luis Ariz, and Tyler Mahle, who was really good last year, are the guys that they brought in. I don't know, I guess you brought in more talent than you lost, so I guess that means I can't really say that you had a terrible offseason, but I don't think any Giants fans are happy at all, so I can't say you had a good offseason, so C. Moving on. I've recently been seeing people say that the Seattle Mariners have won the offseason. I don't know why people say that. They had a good offseason, in my opinion, but I don't think that they won the offseason by any means. They re-signed Josh Naylor. That was very good of them. Obviously, he should be back. He was so good for them in 2025. They traded for Jose A. Ferrier, who I think is a very good reliever. That's a super exciting trade in my opinion. They signed Rob Refsnyder, who is a lefty killer, and then they really overpaid in a trade for Brendan Donovan in my opinion. He's a good player, but they gave up some very good prospects for him, and that's not the end of the world, but it's not like they stole Donovan or anything. That was a very balanced trade, in my opinion, and maybe even an overpay from Seattle. Again, I'm not going to really bash a team for overpaying, but I can't give them extra credit for getting a steal either. They also lost Eugenio Suarez, Jorge Polanco, Harry Ford, who's one of their best prospects, as well as Caleb Ferguson. It's still a good offseason. I'm not trying to bash it. I'm still going to give it a B+. I just have been seeing people say it's like an A+, and I don't think that that's the case at all. This is a very good team and one of the best teams in the American League. Definitely the best team in the AL West, in my opinion. So, good offseason, not the best. B+. Down to the final 5 teams. We have a few more rebuilders coming up, but my favorite rebuilder out of any of them was the St. Louis Cardinals. I think they had a very good rebuilding offseason. Again, there are going to be some people that say, oh, well, they traded away players and didn't get players that are going to make this year better, so I don't think that that's a good offseason. That's fine. That's not the way I think about baseball. I think the fact that they knew that they were not going to win in 2026, so they traded away guys on short-term deals and old, like Wilson Contreras, Sonny Gray, and Nolan Arenado, and then traded away a pretty expendable piece like Brendan Donovan because they already have JJ Weatherholt and Mason Wynn. So they don't really need Brendan Donovan. They have 2 very good players up the middle as long as JJ can come up and be what he's expected to be. So you could trade him, especially when you're going to get a very good pitching prospect like Urangelo. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'm not going to try. It's this guy. He's on the screen right now. He's super good. He's ridiculously good. I lied. It's super easy. It's Sanja. Urangelo Sanja. He's really good. So I really like that. They also brought in a ton of pitchers from the Red Sox like Brandon Clark, Richard Fitz, Hunter Dobbins. I've watched those guys a lot. They're solid players. So I think the fact that they added so much controlled talent for guys that didn't have a lot of control and were aging past their windows of success, that makes a ton of sense to me, and I think they did a really good job setting up their future. So I'm going to give them a B. They did the best rebuild out of any team this year for sure in free agency, and I think they did it correctly. So good job, St. Louis. Chaim Bloom, I always knew you could do it. The Tampa Bay Rays are another team that rebuilt this offseason. and I don't like how they did it quite as much, but I don't think it was necessarily terrible either. They didn't really bring in any great prospects in my opinion, but they also added some guys that a team like the Cardinals didn't really do. They brought in Steven Matz, Nick Martinez, they traded for Gavin Lux and Ben Williamson, and they brought in a flyer like Cedric Mullins. They did lose quite a bit of talent like Brandon Lau, Shane Baz, Josh Lowe, Pete Fairbanks, Jake Mangum. They lost some guys, but because they did try to do that, because it was the point of the rebuild, I guess they can get a C+. It's slightly better than average because they did a decent job rebuilding and added some depth, so I guess C+, but it wasn't great. You guys could have done better. The Texas Rangers are a team that I'm probably going to be lower on than most people, and that's because their biggest acquisition, Mackenzie Gore, I am super low on compared to other people. He's a good pitcher. He's not bad. But I don't think he's an ace. I don't think he's a 2. I think he's a borderline 3, maybe even a 4. But he's valued like he's one of the better young pitchers in baseball, and I don't like that. I think the Rangers massively overpaid for Mackenzie Gore. I think they should have just went out and got Tyler Mahle. He's just as good. Almost. Mackenzie Gore might be a little bit better, but if you look at his stats, he's just not that good. They did bring in Brandon Nimmo, Danny Jansen, which makes a ton of sense. Chris Martin they brought back, that's a great signing, and they also brought in Ryan Brazier, who's solid as well, but they lost Marcus Semien, Adolis Garcia, Merrill Kelly, Phil Maton, Hobie Milner. Like I said, they lost Tyler Mahle. They traded away one of their top prospects in Gavin Feen. They didn't bring back Patrick Corbin, who was good last year for them. Danny Coulomb is still a free agent right now. John Gray, Jonah Heim. They lost a lot of guys and didn't really bring in that much. I'm going to give them a C+ because Mackenzie Gore is a better player than any player that they lost. So I think it's slightly better than league average. Maybe you guys disagree with me. Maybe you agree. Let me know in the comments. I'm not exactly sure what to say about the Rangers. They had so many moving parts for impact players, but they didn't really get better. So I don't know, C+. My comment section did not like when I said that the Toronto Blue Jays were one of the losers of the 2026 offseason. And you know what? I've changed my stance on it a little bit. I still don't think that the Blue Jays had a very good offseason, but I think it was okay. Losing Bo Bichette, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Chris Bassett, and Max Scherzer is rough, especially because they really only brought in one bat, and that bat is Kazuma Okamoto. That's a good player. Probably. We don't really know if he's a good player yet. He hasn't played in MLB, but I'd assume he's good. And they brought in Dylan Cease, who's a good starting pitcher, Tyler Rogers, who's a good back-end pitcher, Cody Ponce, who is very good overseas, so hopefully he can come over here and be good as well. But I don't know. I think they maybe got slightly better, but offensively they got worse. The bullpen got a huge upgrade in Tyler Rogers, and the rotation got upgraded as well in Dylan Cease. So I think they got marginally better, so I'm going to give them a B-. I don't think that they're necessarily losers anymore, but they definitely aren't winners in my opinion. I still don't think that they're winners. And last but not least, the Washington Nationals, and I could be a little harsher on them, but it's the last team of the video, so I'm not going to bash them too hard. They did acquire some good talent. Harry Ford is one of the best catching prospects in baseball. Gavin Feen was one of the Rangers' top prospects, and they gave up Mackenzie Gore and Jose A. Ferrier. Those guys didn't have a ton of control. One of them was a reliever. They didn't really bring in any MLB talent, which does suck, but you got 2 good prospects for 2 solid players. Average, C. They didn't commit heavily to a rebuild, but I don't know. It's a new set of GMs and staff up there, so I'll give them 1 season of grace. I'm giving them a C. They did fine. It wasn't good, wasn't bad, C. I've been recording for almost an hour. That was a very long video. I thought it would be a lot shorter than that. Anyway, if you enjoyed and agree with my rankings or disagree with my rankings but watched to this point, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.